Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Climate Bubble. A massive thank you to everyone for being here, and also a big thank you to everyone who put in so much hard work behind the scenes. So I'm specifically going to say a big congratulations to Alicia Upton of Media Bounty and Nina Rowley of Ingenuity, who worked really, really tirelessly to bring this all together. I'm Harriet Kingaby. I'm Insights Director at Media Bounty and also lead on Act Climate Labs, which is our project to supercharge the effectiveness of climate communications. I'll be chairing today.
Thanks, Harriet. I'm Florencia. I co-authored this report, Beyond the Climate Bubble, with Harriet, and I am a strategy director at Media Bounty and Act Climate Labs. So thank you all for coming and being here today.
So why are we here? We all know that the growth and survival of any business depends on its ability to grow its market share. But when it comes to ethical goods and services, we're currently marketing to the niche that we call the ethical consumer. Now, the problem with this niche is that this group is already likely to have ethical products on their shopping list. So there's going to be a big competition for a share of their wallets. We believe that if you want to see real growth, you need to look elsewhere. So today we'll be talking to you about the outcomes of a major UK-wide research report and introducing you to the group that we think that you should be marketing to instead. So just a little bit on Media Bounty before we start. We are a UK-based independent agency, and we are on a mission to be the leading ethical and leading creative and media agency by 2026. As you can see, my colleagues love their dogs, but crucially for you, we pride ourselves on having wide-ranging experience from the larger network agencies, meaning that our clients really receive an unbeatable level of service, as well as the joy of working with an independent that's full of really passionate people. So we offer brand strategy, creative, media and ethical consultancies for any businesses out there looking to capitalise on some of the trends that we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about why we did this. Flo and I are from very, very different backgrounds. But we both have the same bugbear, which is that actually if we only talk to ethical consumers about ethical issues, and if we over-target Generation Z, younger people, in a country which is actually, if you look at population demographics over the entire world, quite an old demographic, then we're actually going to be massively held back. So we believe that the opportunity for sustainable growth actually lay in identifying our wider groups and selling to them too. So in order to get to know those groups, we actually got ourselves out of the London bubble and we went out to Birmingham in the West Midlands. We talked to rural communities in Yorkshire and also communities in the northeast of England around Newcastle. And we wanted to better understand who these audiences are and how we could best engage them around some of these issues. So we deliberately didn't talk to people who self-identified as ethical consumers. And we also didn't talk to the people who are very opposed to climate change and some of the issues that we talk to. The reason being that actually those consumers might actually boycott some of our products with some of the claims we might make. So we believe that actually we wanted to talk to the 69% of people we call the persuadables. And we call them persuadables because these are people who've not yet made their mind up about some of the issues that we're going to cover today, and also crucially are not necessarily buying ethical products and services.
Yes, thank you, Harriet. So we're going to tell you a little bit more about the methodology of our research, but from that 69% of the British population, we knew that we wanted to focus on three key audiences. The first one was the British Black and South Asian communities. And so we went specifically to Birmingham to meet them and spend some time with them. They were aged between 20 and 65 with a mix of non-white ethnic backgrounds and also represented a mix of socio-economic groups. The second audience that we wanted to look at were rural and semi-rural communities in Yorkshire. So here we talked to slightly older people aged 40 to 75 who were born in that local area or were from that area. And they had to be rural, semi-rural, with a mix of socioeconomic groups and a white mixed background. And finally, the third audience that we wanted to research were an audience that we called urban somewheres in the Northeast. And this is the audience that we spent time with when we were in Newcastle. They are aged 40 to 65. They have strong links to their local areas, which is central to their identities. A mix of socioeconomic grades, but with a focus on working class audiences and predominantly white.
And then what we did is we took all these conversations and all these insights and tried to kind of translate them into some learnings that we feel that we can all act on. Now, the first way to appeal to our persuadables is to connect to local issues and the things that they really care about in their local area. You see brands like the Co-op and Spotify doing this really well and contextualizing the stories that they are telling by making them locally relevant. The second way that we believe we can appeal to our persuadables is to normalize new choices. Sometimes it can feel a bit weird to make a different choice, particularly if you don't know other people that use that product or service. Burger King is doing a fantastic job of helping people to feel like trying out new vegan options is a very, very normal thing to do. And they're working with influencers, for example, in a way that really helps to normalize those switches. The third thing is to ditch the green tax. Now, we know that certain products, sustainable products and services, cost more to produce, but there is also wiggle room in others. During a cost of living crisis, it can be difficult for our persuadables to justify spending more on ethical products and services. So if we can, we do recommend ditching the green tax. The fourth is leading with a strong personal benefit. When you're appealing to the ethical consumer, it makes sense to lead with your green claims. It makes sense for you to tell them, well, actually, by buying this product you're doing your bit to save the planet. But doing your bit to save the planet isn't enough for our persuadables. They need to understand what the benefit is to them. And so if we couch our marketing in personal benefit and human need, we will get a lot further with this group. And number 5 is about finding our trusted messengers. When we talked to our persuadables, they found a lot of, they felt like the green movement was other. They often felt like it was not people like them, and they felt talked down to. But when people that they trusted around other issues talked to them about ethical products and services, they were much more receptive. So we really recommend working with trusted messengers.
Yes, and number 6 is crack the cultural codes. And by that, we mean that brands need to insert themselves into persuadables' worlds, reflect their families, their neighborhoods, their accents, their ways of living, and really reflect those important cultural nuances to create interest and relevance for audiences. Number 7 is sell to men too. It seems like sustainable products are mostly targeted to women. So the idea that green consumption and masculinity don't go together is a barrier that we have to overcome. And, we can do that with advertising that also targets men. Number 8 is buy media where your audience can see it. Obviously, this is 101 to anyone in this call. You all know this already, but what we found out is that social media is the least trusted channel by persuadables. So it's important that sustainable brands don't rely only on social media and can combine it with other broadcast channels as much as possible. Number 9 is funny or die. We know that using humor in advertising is one of the most effective approaches you can take. And this category needs it badly. So yes, please go ahead and try to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek with your communications. I think it's just going to improve the category overall. And finally, much hope with a concrete plan. And by that, we mean, greenwashing is a real issue. And many of you in this call have mentioned it as a concern when you signed up. So we will be addressing it, but it's important that you are able to back up those big messages of hope with concrete actions explained in plain language, and just to make it easier for people to understand. what is actually going on, because big words are just not enough anymore. So yeah, these are our 10 recommendations.
Thank you, Flo. I know this is cheesy for any panel moderator to say, but genuinely, we have so enjoyed the background conversations to putting this panel together. We're joined by some fantastically smart and incredibly nice people. So I just invite all of our panelists to turn their cameras on, and we're gonna say hello. Just a note to the audience, we're going to talk on the panel for about 35 minutes, but there is going to be an opportunity for questions at the end. So if you do have a burning question, I really encourage you to pop it in the chat, and we'll do our best to get around to it at the end. If for whatever reason we don't get to your question, don't worry. There will be plenty of opportunities to kind of get in touch with us afterwards, and we'd be happy to answer anything you've got. So we are joined today not only by Flo, who's going to be talking to us a bit about the report, but also by Seán Boyle, who's the co-founder of Unitmode. So Seán is acted as Twitter's first and only head of sustainability. He's now co-founder of a climate strategy startup called Unitmode, and previously spent 12 years in social media land, previously working at Facebook. It's great to have you with us, Seán. Next up is Seb Munden, who is chair of AdNet and also chair of RAP. AdNet is the advertising industry's global climate change action programme. And RAP is a climate NGO, which stands for the Waste and Resources Action Programme. They work on such enormous issues as the circular economy, climate change, and the food and textiles industries. He's also recently stepped down as general manager of Unilever UK and Ireland, where he worked for 32 years. It's great to have you with us, Seb.
Hi there.
Next up, we have Elizabeth Anyagbuna, who's co-founder of 16:9 Media and president of Bloom UK. She's a mentor and role model at NIFA and one of the Conscious Advertising Network's board members. 16:9 is a collaborative media planning and buying agency, and Elizabeth is an advocate for diversity and inclusion in the media industry as a whole. She's head of allyship. She's president of Bloom and part of the leadership team. She co-founded Bloom in Colour, which is a network within Bloom representing women of colour in 2010. She's also a WACL member and on the board of the Conscious Advertising Network. Elizabeth, I don't know when you find time to sleep, but it's brilliant to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Lovely. So I'm going to start off with some questions, and I'm going to start off with the first to Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, the report states that actually brands need to insert themselves into persuadable worlds and really reflect the cultural codes that are a part of their community. Why do you think this is so important, and what steps do you think the brand should take to really truly understand these audiences, beyond what's in our white paper?
Cheers. Well, I think first of all, the fact that there's 69% of them, is a massive number in itself. So I think that's there's a big, massive gap, really. And if you're looking at trying to target or get reach, I don't think you'd focus on just a 14%, right? Under normal circumstances in marketing. So I guess looking at that from that perspective is important. Also, we're talking to everyone, and I don't think it's too difficult to sort of see why, in that, there's kind of language and just sort of the way the messaging, the sort of complicated use of whether it's shorthand language that's very climate focused or sustainability. A lot of people simply wouldn't necessarily understand it, Then of course, as I sort of when we chatted before, particularly pulling in sort of some of the groups within those groups, within the 69%, say, whether it's the Black community or the Asian community, I guess there's a certain, would I say, sort of distrust, I suppose, that sort of still lingers from past history, really, and that was evident in COVID, say, for example, where those particular groups didn't take up, the vaccination in the same way, and needed an extra sort of level of community, local, influence in order to be able to get them on board, because there was, I suppose, an inherent distrust there. So I think the thing is, the question would be, you're in the community, you're the sort of messaging you sort of see generally would be, I don't know, to do with, let's say, the stats that sort of lean against, I say, Black community, which suggests there's some, say, for example, in the women, say, for example, in maternities, there's a higher death rate for women of color or Black women versus the white counterpart, say, for example, or those held in custody are sort of a higher level of Black men versus white. So when you're now sort of like then speaking to everyone to say, right, you need to get on board with this climate and the need for protecting climate, like I said, there would be a question of why, why me, why you suddenly wanted me to be involved in that. And so it's just sort of like needing not to be, I suppose, sanctimonious, or patronizing or talking at, and kind of like understanding the challenges of said groups that we're kind of looking at, really, to get them on board, and sort of be realistic. A lot of people will just be thinking there's cost of living, you want me to sort of be more green, and get an electric car, but I can't afford that, I need to sort of put food on the table. Food's really expensive. You want me to go green with plant-based food, and that's sadly more expensive than the counterpart. So instead of coming at it from that angle, how about maybe talking more about the health benefits, the things that affect those particular communities and so on. So I think it's just about kind of being getting into the community as you sort of sending your report, speaking the language, being authentic with it, being representative, and as you said, a bit of humor in there, really, so that it's not just sort of talking at them with this kind of, well, you and us, and you need to do this because we're telling you to do this, because we've had a lot of telling us to do things, as and when, I would say.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know that will be music to Flo's ears as well, because I know that this desire to find these common places and make things funnier is something that you always talk about. Seán, on that point around what people really talk about, what people are really, how people really relate to some of these issues. I know at Twitter you were able to actually observe this firsthand. What did you find in the way that people talk about and relate to some of these issues with what's in the report?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and also congrats on a very well-crafted report. I think what I found very interesting was the parallels between your work and the work that we all of the data insights that we were able to gather over the number of years. For full context, where Twitter was able to identify quite credible trends associated with the information that was provided. I think most of the scientific community actually would lean on the open data flow of like a platform like Twitter. I think most of the academic institutions would actually agree that the APIs that Twitter uses are probably the most useful, because it helps identify and connect the dots between what people are saying, what are they actually doing. And I think from inside of Twitter, one of the things that we were able to identify is what were the most compelling results as a byproduct of a lot of these sort of like data analytics that we would provide. A lot of the work that we were doing was with behavioral scientists. My co-founder is actually a computational behavioral scientist at Cambridge. And a lot of the work that we were doing was actually as a product of what he was finding as an interaction between the launch of policies and things that were connected between narratives that governments were making and the actual actions of Twitter users. What I really found quite interesting was we used to, when we were designing Twitter sustainability strategy, we broke the categories into 4, and it was in its alignment to climate action. So how closely aligned would they be to actually undertake a climate action? So we quite coincidentally, we bucket them into 4. So we had the actionists, which were at one end of the spectrum, which were the ones that would, they don't require much to be able to sort of undertake specific actions. Then we had this what I would call also the persuadables now, which sort of correlate with your work, which would be those that are informed, that essentially fully agree, fully understand the importance of climate, but would be less likely to sort of undertake any specific actions as an interaction of the communication. Then those that would be undecided and at the very tail end would be the ones that would be essentially contrarian to most of the overall position. So what I found quite interesting, and we had a lot of conversations with UNFCCC, with the IPCC in terms of articulating and communicating this correctly. And I found quite fascinating, like the find your trusted messengers as one example, where in a lot of the analysis that we were making, a lot of work is grounded by the Yale Program for Climate Communications or George Mason University's work on behavior changes. The importance, for instance, of having your the weather people communicate a climate as a very very credible approach to take in terms of really being able to share the information and achieve the right actions. Or, for instance, in Northern Africa, with religious leaders that would potentially be the ones that are driving the most credible actions. But anyways, I'll leave it there. This is a topic I can talk forever, and I know we have limited time, so.
Thank you. We will definitely come back to you and delve into that a bit more. And that's exactly what we found when you're talking about issues related to climate. People would be more likely to listen to farmers. They would listen to chefs around information around plant-based food, for example. It's about thinking. It is definitely about thinking laterally about who is trusted. And Flo, I'm going to come to you next because I think that quite nicely leads into your background. So you did a degree in cultural studies while working at Media Bounty as strategy director. And you'd not worked in the climate sector before, doing, setting up this kind of whole raft of projects. I mean, how did this shape your approach to creating the research?
Yes, well, definitely my background in cultural studies was a big factor in the development of this research methodology. I think firstly because when I was doing the analysis of the sustainability category, I was able to spot so many norms around, the same type of consumer over and over again. So like a middle class, white, potentially, left consumer in their homes. The depictions were always very similar. And that translated into the briefs that I was getting, briefs that were just repeated over and over again in terms of the same type of consumer. So all of the kind of cultural signs and signifiers were pointing at this very specific way of life that sustainability products kind of plugged in. And so to me, limiting sustainable products into this very specific consumer culture was a big part of the problem of why, sustainable products just weren't growing fast enough. So what I wanted to kind of understand was what cultural cues sustainability marketing needed to incorporate to increase its relevance and basically mainstream appeal. And so for that, we had to leave the London bubble. We had to go somewhere else. It was a wonderful trip around Britain where we got to meet really, really interesting people. But that basically informed the research approach. So I just wanted to combine an approach that looked at persuadables world from the outside. So that's why we interviewed experts who, when you think about expert, you think, academics. But we also interview people who had done film projects around specific topics, about working class communities. Or we also interviewed a community leader that was working with British Asian communities. So our experts actually what provided was that kind of like perspective from the outside, but also in the persuadables world. So we also carried out semiotic safaris across all of our locations. And we just also kind of wanted to embed the project in the lived experiences of persuadables. And that's why we interviewed people at their homes. And what we went to the places and the community centers that they attend to, or the places that mean something to them, just to kind of understand how their social context, you know, their perceptions, everything that surrounds them, you know, was shaping the way that they thought about sustainable products. I think in that sense, the priority also came from understanding that if we want to make, if we want to be on track with the Paris Agreement, we need to make low carbon lifestyles desirable. And the only way to make a lifestyle desirable is to understand the lifestyle around these audiences, and their culture was the first way in for us. So yeah, it was a very interesting approach which cultural agency Bricolage helped us develop, but it was very fruitful to do it in that way.
Fabulous. So that richness of information is going to help us mainstream sustainable lifestyles, essentially. I like that. So Seb, we know that, you know, if we're going to achieve all these things, we need to, you know, I think, change our marketing approach to sustainable products and services. What needs to happen within the ad industry to support this change?
Well, look, I think we've got to start by acknowledging that consumer products generally contain a lot of the carbon footprint that needs to be worked on. And so both for marketers in the consumer products industry and for the advertising industry, we have to make the big brands better and the better brands bigger. And that's not just a challenge for advertising, that's a challenge for marketing, supply chain, and all the way back through to the provenance of the raw materials. Effectively, what we have to do is decouple the kind of sort of prosperity and business growth from the one-time consumption of natural resources. So there's job one actually is reinvent products and services. And the advertising industry can be very powerful in working with the consumer products industry to do that. But for the marketers out there, that's job number one. Job number one is if you have a very big and a brand with a big penetration, big franchise, use the power of that brand to reinvent your supply chain, make your product more sustainable. So where does AdNet Zero come in? Well, AdNet Zero is the plan for the decarbonisation of the advertising industry. And if you think about it, that has two parts, which is change the way we work. So that's decarbonise the process. So that's to do with less travel, virtual sets, more conscious production, more conscious media, and the decarbonisation of the media supply chain. That all needs to happen. But actually, the thing that's going to make the biggest impact is, are we going to put the special powers of the advertising industry to work for the benefit of human beings, for well-being, for the reduction of climate change? Because the advertising industry has this amazing power to frame and reframe the desirability of products and services. And that's what we have to do. And actually, having spent now quite a few decades trying to make products more sustainable, one of the conclusions that I came to a while ago was that actually people don't need to buy sustainable products because of their sustainability. And actually, I think that's what your research is talking about, which is, look, there are probably about 14% of people out there who are going to buy things because they're more sustainable. And there may be a group of people who might, on a good day, kind of say, yeah, you know what, I'll give that a whirl. But actually, what we really want is people to buy stuff they want and need that is already with sustainability built in, including those kind of lifestyle nudges that may require less consumption of more durable, repairable, reusable, or you know, library of things. There's fantastic advertising recently on the London Underground about children's bicycles. Now, many of you may not be old enough to be in a situation where you've had to buy children's bicycles, but you may remember your own experience of bicycles. They're always just slightly too small and slightly too old, aren't they? And they're never quite as shiny and beautiful as the one you want. why, oh, why would you then go through a process of people buying those things, then having to think about how to get rid of them? Library of children's bicycles, brilliant idea. So I think what we've got to do then is put the power of advertising behind either making the big brands better or the better brands bigger. And AdNet Zero is a collective. It's a way in which, in a pre-competitive way, clients, advertising agencies, production companies can work together on both the decarbonisation of the industry itself and the promotion of better products and lifestyles. And one of the things that caught my attention in the report was there's a fantastic verbatim. It says, look, if it's so good, how come no one I know has bought it? Yeah. Well, that's why we need the advertising industry to get behind driving more sustainable products and lifestyles. Because you want no one to think that. You want to think everyone I know has done that, has bought that, or has changed their behavior for the better. So I think that's really the power of the collective of signing up for AdNet Zero, but it's actually the bigger mandate for our industry as well.
Fantastic. All the brands and agencies on this call. This sounds like a challenge, and it sounds like a pretty awesome brief, to be honest.
I think that could be a lot of fun, don't you?
I think it'd be great fun, and hugely rewarding. Flo, I'm going to come back to you real quick because I think there's going to be lots of brands on this on this call who might think, well, hang on a minute, we're a sustainable brand. We lead with our ethical credentials. That's what we do. So what kind of advice would you give to those brands who want to stand out, but might not feel comfortable doing it without spotlighting those credentials?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Seb, you touched on that. In such a great way, because what we found out is that for persuadable, so not these, ethical consumer, the ethical credentials are not really the main driver of purchase. And it's good to see that we're kind of like looking at the other research and coming to terms with that, because it might be difficult to hear, and we know that there is also academic research showing that other factors such as familiarity with the product, price, those things play a bigger role when it comes to purchase decisions. So sustainable products, they just need to be great. They need to be great first, and they need to offer that really great value first, and then also showcase these little lifestyle nudges that Seb was talking about. We have done some work with Noble Foods, for example, where we launched their first plant-based liquid egg replacement. So that was a vegan replacement for egg, but there was no mention of vegan anywhere in our campaign. We just focused on showing the amazing recipes that you could make, because egg is so difficult to replace, and actually Cracked, the no egg was able to kind of be that replacement that vegan people need, and so many other people might want to try as well. So just focusing on the product benefits is the way to go. And we've also run other climate change related campaigns with the work that we do at ACT Climate Labs. And those campaigns are never about kind of like saving the world from catastrophe, but they are about green jobs, they are about clean industries, they're about clean air. And so it's also what you were mentioning, Elizabeth, of like showing the personal benefit first. And so a great product, sometimes great design, showing a very clear benefit, and we will get more people to, potentially go over that barrier of like, well, if this is so good, then why not? None of my friends have it or have heard of it. And more people getting on board with those lifestyle changes.
Harriet, can I just chip in a second there? I think this is such a big point. You know, the truth is that the last 30 years tell us that people haven't changed their behaviors by seeing polar bears on ice drifts, honestly. So we have to make it much more personal. And I think that's what the clues in your research are, how to do that. But also, if I think about my 30 years at Unilever, when I started, the dose of Persil automatic liquid was 200 ml. That's like almost a glass of orange juice. And today it's 22 ml. That's a reduction by 90%. And that's gone from petrochemicals to largely, but not exclusively, but largely plant-based chemicals. Now, we never spoke to consumers about that. We just got on with it and we just did it. And we talked about Persil in the way people have always talked about Persil, which is great results and, you know, families looking good and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, so I think there's really something in this.
Brilliant. I mean, couldn't agree more. So I have a kind of double-headed question here. The first side of which is for Elizabeth and the second side which is for Seán. So Elizabeth, you know, you talked in the outset about certain communities actually who lack trust in the current sustainability movement. So, you know, if we work with challenger brands and use sustainable products, how can we build that trust? And then Seán, I have a second question for you around greenwashing. So actually, when we're making a lot of these, you know, when we're thinking about how we make a lot of these claims, we are, you know, I think a lot of brands are concerned about greenwashing. So, you know, kind of how can then we also avoid, you know, kind of eroding trust in greenwashing, and, you know, and do that. So Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to build on what Seb said, because I think it's brilliant, actually, what you said. You know, I'm picking up on that sort of note within the report about if it's so good, how come I haven't heard of it? How come you know, no one I know has bought it? And I sort of, my build on that is really, if it's so good, then how come I don't see myself in this creative that you were sort of talking about? That's wonderful. You know, how come I can't relate to it? You know, you're talking a language I just don't understand, and you're not taking the time to actually, you know, get to understand me. So yeah, if it's so good, then why am I not reflected in that? You know, and I think as I said before, humor is a good thing, you know, but also I think a certain element of humility or realism can be put in. So, for example, I had a little research after seeing your research, you know, looking at sort of practices, you know, from certain other countries, you know, that could be deemed as green, even though it's not positioned as green, because, well, it's not us talking in our first world industrialized sort of place. And so and some of these practices will come out of necessity. Say, for example, you know, in certain parts of Africa, it rains, everyone, literally every house comes up with their buckets, you know, and their pans and whatever, and collect the rainwater, and then they you know, recycle that and use that into flushing toilets, or, you know, or whatever it is they do. You know, and I had to look at sort of other things like post-war. What were some of the things they did then that obviously was coming out of a necessity, but then actually could then be, you know, put into what we do today? Or, you know, in a place I know in Nigeria, where they some of the bottles of drinks that they have is actually bottles in a crate. You buy the crate with the bottle. You know, you then once everything's finished, you then take it back to where you bought it, and then it's recycled over and over again, as opposed to obviously buying plastics, you know, single use, etc. All these sorts of things have been hanging around for. They've been done for decades, and yet it's not classed, or it hasn't been, you know, recognized as that. So how about we take some of these communities, you know, and sort of, you know, learnings from those, and put that into the creative? Because if I saw that in a creative, sort of in a humorous way, you know, like, oh, you know, 5 or 6 people using the same bath water, say, for example, because we're consuming, sort of, you know, we don't want to waste water. People will relate to that, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, you know. So make it more relatable, more familiar. And actually getting into the local communities and understanding the language and stripping it back. What Seb sort of says is very simple. In a way, you want to know it's one of the, I suppose, the smaller brands that you want to make bigger because of all their green credentials. But those communities aren't actually going to really pay attention to that. You know, if it's great, that's wonderful. If you're now telling me it's wonderful because of those things, and it's cost effective, and there's a benefit to me, you know, and you're talking my language, and I can actually see that, then I'm more likely to want to go and sort of buy that, you know, versus talking at me and telling me that I need to go green because I'm a bad person if I don't. It's even sort of like, the yellow labels in the supermarkets, the ones, the food that's marked down, there could be something in there, where you could kind of use that so that there's no wastage of food, so for example, so flip it on its head. So instead of being like, oh, we're going to sort of like get the cheap things before it expires, how about saying, well, this is actually a way of getting around, I'm talking about supermarkets now, getting around food waste, because certainly post-war and certain other countries in Africa, they don't waste any food. Do you know what I mean? So sort of learn from those communities. So that's what I would say.
Fabulous, thank you.
So I can jump in on the question of the greenwashing. So this is definitely something that is being incentivized by either the carrot or the stick, right? And I think that the finger in the pulse at the moment is the stick is getting bigger and bigger over time, whether it's by losing credibility, reputational loss. This is by regulatory landscape changes. I know it's a big concern. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing a startup, or I'm venturing into the scary world of startups. But I think that the key issue here on greenwashing that I think would be that does tie a lot with the with essentially the framework of your own report is on how we, for instance, at Unitmode view the greenwashing assessment process. Right, this is where we evaluate it with essentially a formula of 3 components: the messenger, the message, and the context in which that message is actually conveyed. So the greenwashing detection units that we're trying to sort of like build with machine learning will be evaluating the those trusted voices, the content of the information that is being presented. Is it being done by somebody that is congruent with, credible alignments with the path, to the Paris Agreement or to like net zero goals that the countries are actually declaring? Is the message that is being actually conveyed also in alignment with what that messenger is essentially assessing? Like, does it actually connect as it relates to sort of like shared goals and values, personal beliefs? Like, does it achieve social connections? Is it actually pursuing altruism? Is it actually aimed to achieve power and influence, or even is it a survival component? When we were doing all of our research at Twitter, we saw that many of the ads in other parts of the world, and we talked a lot about the global north and global south, a lot of them related to survival narratives, which is quite difficult to construe. So an ad that might be seen as being quite, probably have low impact in a particular context, in another one would be seen as being extremely tone deaf. What we're actually seeing as well as it relates to context is the regulatory landscape is changing dramatically. The use of certain words need to be done in a way in which is aligned with whatever definitions are adopted by that particular like regulatory body. But it's an ever evolving. Today I actually posted something from I think on LinkedIn around a motor decree that was launched actually earlier in the year in France around even EVs having to sort of like communicate and identify the real impact of the products that they're producing, and basically highlight how they're actually credibly, it's not only good to convey what the product is, but you have to be a trusted, like as you sort of like a trusted messenger in all of this. So I think that's what I really liked about your report. There's so many different overlaps between the groundwork that we produce, that I produced back when I was at Twitter, but also in terms of what we're actually seeing as being sort of the trends moving forward.
Fabulous. It's so it's so interesting to hear about, because I think trust is a really, really big issue, and how we maintain that trust and how we gain that trust, I think, in some spaces. So we've not got an awful long amount of time left, and I think, judging by some of the questions that are coming in, thank you for your really well thought out questions, by the way. They actually align with some of the lines of questioning that we were going to go with. I think what we're going to do, in order to make sure that we give our kind of audience the time that their questions deserve, what I might suggest is that we go round, and I think we had a question around what is the one thing that everyone on this call can do to really, really supercharge this idea that we need to grow this economy for the products and services that the world needs. If each one of our panelists could let us know the one thing everyone here can do, I would be very, very interested to hear. So Flo, you are first on my screen. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I think it would be great for people in this call to think about the internal allies that they can make. I think if sustainability issues have been the domain of the CSR departments for way too long, and I think there are collaborations between marketing, finance, investor relations, other internal teams that are needed to really grow the market for sustainable products and for sustainable initiatives. So I would say go and make some friends that can support you in this journey.
Fabulous. Make some friends. Right. Excellent. Seb, you're next on my screen, so I'm going to come to you next.
I think you've got to really understand the insights around why people don't buy the better products, or what are the trigger moments that would make them do so, and make sure that in every brief that goes in, that insight around the triggers and barriers is absolutely clear. And of course, signing up to join AdNet Zero, you become part of a community of people trying to do similar things, and you don't have to go it alone. And there's lots of resource there, including things like greenwashing, particularly in a UK regulatory context. So there's a lot of content and companionship. But the most important thing is this: do you really understand why people aren't buying better products at the moment, or what the trigger moment is that your communication needs to kind of embrace?
Brilliant. So just incorporating that behaviour change knowledge, and again, finding friends and buddies to kind of support you on that journey. I love that. Elizabeth.
Hi, yeah. So I would say demystifying and educating, oneself really, as well as sort of educating others and making friends who can spread the word. Is key, certainly in those sort of communities where it could be baffling or just feel like it's not necessarily sort of talking to them, and be reflective of said communities that you're trying to target, and really understand them, not just, but diverse thoughts within the creative, diverse thought within the output, but it needs to be authentic, and consider actually putting back into some of these communities, the heritage, say, of these communities, as a way of kind of giving back, because we are kind of like the polluters, as in our side, and they bear the brunt of it.
Fantastic. And Seán?
Yes, well, I would just say, just do your best to understand the impact of or just become self-aware of the unintended consequences of what your product is actually aiming to produce, or what the key outcome is of the product that you're actually trying to showcase to potential consumers. I think that's something that will allow you to continue to build trust, and being very transparent around what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. It will always go a long way in terms of ensuring that this is a credible exchange and a desired outcome.
Fantastic. Okay, so that is, as well as these briefs that are going to change the world, these are our kind of thoughts for what everyone can do right now. We've had some incredible questions. I'm not sure that we can we can do them all justice in the time, but one that really stood out for me, and this is for all panelists. So we've got one here that talks about, what are your thoughts, all panelists, what are your thoughts on green growth, the creation economy, degrowth and decoupling? What do you think are the best ways forward? And Seb, I just wanted to kick off with you, because I know we discussed this in the in our background call.
Yeah, so look, I think this point is absolutely central to changing kind of the economic model, which is the moving from sort of one-time consumption to circular economy and reuse. So that is at the heart of it, and therefore for all brand owners and in people selling products and services, focusing on how you decouple the value creation from the consumption of natural resources is the most important task. And at WRAP, the Waste and Resources Action Programme, that's essentially what we do with both government. Government is one of our biggest customer, both the UK government and also some of the devolved governments and governments overseas, but also increasingly working with businesses to reinvent supply chains and reinvent products and services. This is at the heart of green growth, if you like. Now, there may be a reduction in consumption of the final product or service, but it may be that actually you consume or use a service that has already reduced the consumption within it. So for people who are worried about, well, is this just going to be a terrible lifestyle kind of change? It may not be. It may not be. It all comes down to the design of products and services that really radically tackle the wastefulness of their creation and particularly their disposal.
Thank you. Would any of our other panelists like to jump in on this?
I'm being overly polite, Elizabeth. I was going to give you a couple of seconds. No, I think it's I mean, being very transparent, the advertising industry it underpins the influence economy, right? Like, this is the reason all of the social medias exist, is because they are underpinned by that need to be able to or they're allowed to do a lot of the things that they're able to do because of the funneling of the advertising and so on. I think that one of the things we just need to be very, very mindful of is it can be a force for good, as anything that is meant to be anything that is its ultimate outcome is to influence behaviors. I think that the one thing that I would really, really challenge the people that are in this webinar to think is that you hold a greater responsibility than most, and in many occasions it doesn't feel like that. You're feeling it's very transactional, or but I do feel that finding the principles that also underpin the creation of your products or your services as best as you possibly can, align them with what the ultimate desired outcome is, and view it in the lens of the messenger, the message, and the context, and you will ultimately come up with an outcome that I think is probably better aligned to a future that we all want to live in. And I'll leave it very open-ended there, but might give Elizabeth a little bit of time to come up with something very clever, way more clever than I would.
And there are voluntary agreements around which, where the sort of collaboration required. Very often, to do what Seán's talking about, it requires the collaboration of many different industries before it even gets to the advertising industry. And I think the power of some of the voluntary agreements, for instance, around plastic and packaging, around textiles, that really to move as an industry in a pre-competitive space towards new models.
Yeah, I agree. I think just to add to that, I think we kind of need to sort of there needs to be some level of lobbying government, to a certain degree, to be able to get some benefit to come together to do that, because there will be some, companies that will obviously potentially want to go down that route, but there is an impact. So I think getting the government involved, so it's on a bigger sort of stage, right? I think is very important, in the mix, that's what I would sort of say. What I think is, whether we like it or not, this is where we're headed. So it's either brands kind of get on board now, and do what they need to do to kind of get there, or they kind of get left behind, So it's just about pre-planning, I think, ultimately, because those sorry.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to add that because
Yeah.
I think you said it so well. This is where we're headed, and I think, you know, without a climate change mitigation plan or a climate change plan, there is no business plan. Because you know, we work with a client that sells cranberry-based products, and you know, there are only around 80 years more of cranberry crops, right? So what are you going to do in 80 years when you don't have any more cranberries? And I think a lot of companies can get to, you know, can think about those elements around how the natural resources are, you know, impacting the way that they produce their products, and how they use them, and in which rates, because you gotta not only ensure the performance of your business today, but you also need to ensure the permanence of your business in, you know, 100 years time, when there are less natural resources going around. So I think in that sense, yes, without a climate plan, there is no business plan from my perspective.
Thank you, everybody. And I am really sorry to everyone that asked a question. If we do carry on, we're going to run over on time. So I just wanted to say an enormous thank you to Flo, to Seb, to Seán, and to Elizabeth for that. I certainly learned a lot, and I really hope that that was useful for everybody else. If you would like to get in contact with us, if you've got unanswered questions, Flo and I can both be contacted by our first name last name at mediabounty.com, and we'd be happy to help. So basically, happy before we forget, you know, happy International Women's Day, and it's been a pleasure to spend it all with you this morning.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks.